laugh a bit anymore. Okay. So, all right. So, what's a pest? What's a pest? That's today's program. What's a pest? What do you all think? What is a pest to you?
My little sister.
My little sister. Yeah. I don't have a sister. My brothers. Yeah. We're great pests, the siblings. I was the pest. I was the youngest brother of 3. So I was the thorn in the side. Yeah. I was a very good pest. But what is a pest? What's a pest? Something annoying. I mean, honestly, that's a great way to put it. Something annoying. I mean, it is something that is annoying, but we're going to put that in the context of outside of siblings, but we're going to put that in the context of our landscapes, our gardens. So what's a pest in our garden? What's something that you've experienced in your landscape or garden that you say is a pest?
Marsh rabbits.
Marsh rabbits. Oh, yeah.
Armadillos.
Armadillos. Yeah, the marsh rabbits. I know. Sue, I know that's been the ongoing battle for Sue for years, I know. And I know that she's not the only one. She's not the only one dealing with marsh rabbits. Squirrels, yeah. What are some other pests that you deal with? Fire ants. Yesterday, we were doing the FFL recognition training, some of the master gardeners, and the crazy ants were tickling our feet the whole time. So, so luckily there weren't fire ants, but there's a lot of them. Mealybugs. That's a great one. That's a great common one.
Aphids.
Yeah, aphids. Yep. Scale insects. That's a great one. So there's diseases. There's a fungus. Yeah. There's a lot of things that we can consider a pest. Like a pest is just a very broad category. Honestly, it's a very broad category. But I like how you said anything that's annoying. Honestly, yeah, we could just say a pest is anything that's annoying within the landscape, and there's a lot of terms that are thrown around with pests that part of today's program, I want us to identify, if I can change slides, I can't find my mouse. There we go. So part of today's program, I want us to say, what is a pest? But then I want to talk about integrated pest management, because it does not make a hill of beans for me to talk to you all about pests without talking to you about the best management practices for dealing with pests. And that's where we get this fancy phrase called integrated pest management. In other words, it's just the proactive way or the best way for us to manage pest and disease, invasive species, whatever it might be, any of those pests within the landscape. We follow IPM strategy. So I want to talk about that. But then we're going to talk about some of the other best strategies to manage yard pests. And we can talk about some of those specific strategies at the end, because we can't talk about every single strategy for every single pest. But the best thing that we can do today is kind of talk about what are those, just the general strategies that we can do. And I can even introduce some of those resources that help us identify some of the best management practices or IPM strategies for specific pests. So, but why is this all important? I do this with all of my programs. I bring it back to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. So the FFL program is our statewide horticulture program on how we maintain attractive, healthy, colorful, beautiful yards. Enter whatever cool verb or adjective you want in. But it's going to be friendly to wildlife. They're environmentally responsible, and they can be significantly less work than a traditional landscape. But the ultimate goal of these is to help conserve water, Florida's water resources, protect water quality, but as well as help enhance and protect biodiversity. Because a lot of the concerns that we have when we think about pest and pest management is thinking about chemical pesticide applications, and some of those big impacts it might have on non-target species. So when I say non-target species, think about honeybees. Pesticides or insecticides can be put down. Pollinators such as honeybees can end up being impacted by that pesticide because it has residual effects in it that might be in the pollen, etc. So our goal is how can we make sure that we're maintaining following the Florida Friendly Landscaping principles, but we really look about how can we make sure we're protecting and enhancing biodiversity through appropriate pesticide use. In fact, when we look at the 9 principles that kind of govern the whole Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, The first one, right plant, right place, is to me the most important. If you do not follow right plant, right place, you cannot do anything else on this list. You cannot achieve any of the principles. So if you follow right plant, right place, plants are going to be happier in the landscape. And when plants are happier in the landscape, they're not stressed and they're less attractive to pest and disease. Right? So, and then in the Florida-friendly landscaping program, in principle number 6, specifically for today, is that managed yard pest. So when we think about the Florida-friendly landscaping program, managing yard pests responsibly is so important because we want to reduce how many pesticides that we're going to be using. Pesticides are very valuable tools when used properly. The biggest concerns that we have with pesticide use is the improper use of pesticides. And that's why we talk about integrated pest management, because you'll learn that pesticide use when managing pests is the last resort, when all else fails. But right plant, right place is the best place to start in understanding how can I make sure I'm planting a landscape that's just going to be successful. And managing yard pests, principle number 6, is that huge portion of how do we make sure that we're managing to protect our pollinator species as vital insects and other flora and fauna in our landscapes. So we're trying to minimize how many chemical inputs that we do put into our yard. So what's a pest? How many of you ever done? So I do apologize. In this presentation, there's going to be a lot of photos that probably give everyone a little bit of the squirmies. So, but anyways, so what is a pest? Tomato hornworms can be a pest, but they're beautiful moths. The sphinx moths, yeah. But God help your tomatoes. But anyways, but a pest is any organism that is in an unwanted place, an annoyance, an annoying thing in the garden. It's in an unwanted place. So when we look at number of pests, less than what % of all insect species are known to be pests?
Very tiny, 20 or something.
Less, it's like very tiny, maybe 1%. Like when we're talking about insects, about 1% of insect species are considered actual pests. The rest are beneficial or benign. So when I say benign, they're in our landscape and they don't do anything good or bad, but they're still vital to the ecosystem, of course. But the beneficial ones make up a huge portion of that, around 40% of the total insect species. So we're doing a lot of work to manage roughly 1% of insect species. But on the back end of that, a lot of times we're impacting all those beneficial insects or those ones that don't cause any damage. The ones we're hurting more the ones that work for us rather than against us. So most of our plants in urban landscapes are heavily oversprayed. It is estimated that homeowners apply 4 to 10 times more pesticides per acre than farmers. That's a lot. And guess what? Our farmers are producing food. What are we producing? Or joy. Yeah, our own joy, our satisfaction. But that's a huge amount, 4 to 10 times. That's like national average. So 4 to 10 times more per acre than agricultural producers.
Hey, so I don't know who all watched golf this weekend. It was the John Deere Classic.
The John Deere Classic, yeah.
Between Iowa and Illinois, right on the river. But it was interesting because one of the commercials for John Deere was they talked about some of this type of stuff on how they manage crops and whatnot. About 15 years ago, some college guys from MIT developed a system when they're spraying their crops and whatnot. It identifies the weed versus the good plant, and it just sprays the weed.
Yes. So, yeah. So I'll elaborate a little bit on that because there's some really cool, what was just mentioned for everyone online is there's some really cool research, especially now with AI technology, that we have cameras on these big booms that we have out in agricultural land. And those cameras have the ability to instantaneously recognize if something is a target or a non-target species. Like talk about weeds is a great example. And it'll only spray that specific plant. And it happens just as quickly as they just drive over the fields. So the emitters, rather than just being just all sprayed constantly, it's literally the emitters just going to individually like like spot treatment agricultural fields.
It said they cut down the usage to like 1/10 of what it used to.
Yeah, they use very little herbicide in when that's affordable, you know, with the people that are using that. But that's becoming more common, is using these smart technologies for pesticide management. But that's a great example. We're seeing some really cool advancements in pesticide use. Yeah.
I think another reason maybe, you might address this, but I think that professional farmers are constantly, like by the hour, monitoring their plants, and homeowners usually go out once a week and look, and by that time you're like, until you have to overspray.
Yeah, so there is some scouting. We'll talk about scouting is a huge component. The agricultural producers, you know, if they have thousands of acres, they can't necessarily scout like that. But for small producers, they are scouting on a regular basis, more frequently than a homeowner may. But we'll talk about the value of scouting as part of integrated pest management.
Our dog used to do a good job on armadillos every morning.
My dog is I call my biological control for armadillos. I let him out at night and he chases all armadillos out. It's great. So I feel bad for the neighbors because he's barking, you know, but anyways, but it's important to know that a pest is not just an insect. A lot of times when we're thinking about our gardens and our landscape, a pest goes beyond just insects. It's pretty much anything. So like the marsh rabbits, or squirrels, armadillos, you know, anything that can become a nuisance. So, but it's important to think about when we're thinking about pests, the concerns with overuse of different pesticides. So essentially when we use a pesticide, I almost think of it as a type of like almost like an addiction to a certain extent. So when we put down pesticides improperly, it disrupts the natural balance of what's happening within the ecosystem, the environment, whether it's your yard or a larger area, whatever it might be. And what it does is that creates what we call an environmental contamination. If there's too much residual or misuse, it can lead to potential health implications as well as plant damage. But essentially what happens if we put down, if we're not applying pesticides properly or the overuse of them, we disrupt natural controls. So like those beneficial insects that help manage the pest population, we're hurting them as well. So what ends up happening is you end up being stuck in a chemical dependence of pesticides because your pests are able to recover and are quicker than your beneficial insects. So you end up getting stuck because you don't have that natural control in your environment anymore. So you almost become dependent on a pesticide use. Now you can break that, but it is hard nonetheless. So, but there are different types of pesticides. So pesticide is a big, broad category. So that is essentially where pesticide is a mixture of any substance intended for preventing, destroying, or repelling, or mitigating any pest. So when we talk about a pesticide, how many of you use BT or neem oil or anything like that? That is considered a pesticide. So a lot of people don't think it is because it's more of a biological organic thing, but that is a pesticide. It's labeled. We have to, the label is the law on all those. So it's important, but there's so many different types of pesticides, honestly. That includes things like insecticide, herbicide, miticide, nematicide, fungicide, all those different sides that you probably are familiar with or at least heard of. The most common ones for homeowners is we hear about fungicide, insecticide, and herbicide. So, but there's a lot of different pesticides. And as homeowners, you don't always have access to all of them. You have access like the general use, but then we also have restricted use, which you have to be licensed for. So, but some of the big, again, with that consequences of dependency. So usually we're seeing a resistance is developed from the different insects in the landscape. So if we put down a pesticide, it's not going to kill every single one of those pests. We see this predominantly with insects, quicker with insects, but it may not kill all those insects. And that insect might actually develop like a resistance to that pesticide that you put down. And it's going to have an offspring that also has that resistance to that pesticide. So when you come back and you put down the same pesticide time after time again, essentially your pesticides are no longer going to work. So you're putting down some type of control mechanism that has zero to no impact. And we can see in a single season with some insects develop a complete resistance to any pesticide that we put down. But we can even see that with herbicides, see that with miticides, any type of our pesticides. That's more of like those chemical applications rather than biological controls. We see resistance get developed very quickly. So that's why a lot of times we're talking about chemical application, which we'll get to, is like, how do we make sure that we're rotating our pesticides and make sure that we're not putting the same thing down again and again, because the minute that you do, it's not going to work. So I hear this happen a lot from homeowners. It's like you have fire ants. Now, fire ants are an invasive species, and there's always the two same chemicals that people put down to manage fire ants. And one of the biggest ones is bifenthrin, which is very effective pesticide for fire ants. But have you ever had anything where you put down fire ant control and it didn't necessarily work on the fire ants? There's a good chance it's because you've been using a lot of the bifenthrin, and those colonies are starting to develop like a little bit of resistance to it. So, but anyway, so it's important because those pest species rebound quicker, and they start to create this resilience or resistance to it. But I think it's important to time out, because a lot of times when we start to think about different words or these different words that we use to classify things, and I do hear a lot of misuse of the terms, a lot. So I want to make sure that we kind of talk about some of these. So native species. So a native species is a species that occurs naturally in a specified geographic area. So a non-native species is any species that's not from that area. So an introduced species is any species that was brought to a new geographic area intentionally or unintentionally by humans. An established is a self-sustaining population within a geographic area without the need for human intervention. So they've been introduced somehow, and then they're self-sustaining without us intervening. Doesn't mean they're invasive. It's important to note. Because we do have actual definitions of what is an invasive, what's a nuisance, and what's called range change. So an invasive species, there is no such thing as any native plant that can be invasive. Does not exist. In order to be invasive, it has to be an introduced non-native species that causes environmental, economic, and/or human health impacts. So there has to be some type of impact associated with that species in order for it to be considered an invasive species. Now, there are a lot of plants that people will call the office and be like, Taylor, I have this invasive vine growing all over my yard, and it's Virginia creeper. Is Virginia creeper invasive? No, it's not. It's a native species. You may not like it, but it's a native species, so it cannot be invasive. It's actually, in some situations, that's where you can say, well, it's a nuisance. So a nuisance is essentially any of those species that is bothersome, native or non-native, not necessarily invasive. And that's subjective, very subjective. So like Virginia creeper, I mean, when I lived up north, Virginia creeper was used as a climbing vine all over the place for its ornamental value, beautiful fall color. And then here in Florida, everyone hates it. You know, I like it, but I mean, same with like a lot of our smilax, native plant, you know, get the same thing. Grapevine, native plant, very important to wildlife. All these vines are important to wildlife, but those are nuisance species. But there is like air potato vine, that's invasive. That's an invasive species. So we just have to make sure that we're aware of what these definitions are. And then there is range change. And that's where circumstances where species, current or existing, their range changes, where they grow, whether it's growing, shrinking, shifting, and this exists with native and non-native, with or without human assistance. A great example that's happening right now that we're watching a lot of is black mangrove, or just the mangrove. Some of you probably heard me talk about this, is we have had populations of mangrove exist in Nassau County before. A great example that I can point to in literature is John Muir's walk to the Gulf. When he's coming through Fernandina Beach, he mentions mangroves in it being here in Fernandina Beach. But nonetheless, we're seeing self-sustaining populations of mangroves moving up the coast. And the furthest north incidence has officially been reported on Cumberland Island. So that's a range change. So we're seeing mangroves range change. So anyways, it's important just to know that these are these terms. But some of the terms that we cannot use is a native invasive. Does not exist. Can't exist. Yeah, no such thing. An invasive exotic is a very confusing term because, you know, sometimes you think of exotic like, ooh, that, you know, that sounds fun. So but it's also considered a redundancy of terms. And invasive weed is very subjective. So, all right. But anyways, so let's talk about IPM, integrated pest management. So this is how are we actually managing these pests that are in our landscape. So when we talk about integrated pest management, we are thinking from prevention to intervention. How do we prevent the problem from happening in the first place? And then as needed, we can intervene. So I also look at it this way. Do this first on the bottom, those cultural changes, physical, mechanical, if cultural changes don't work. Biological, if physical and mechanical doesn't work, and if biological doesn't work, then that's when you can start trying to do some of those chemical pesticide applications. So you're going from the do this first to the if I have to. If I have to do this, that's going to be your best. So we're wanting to always think about what's its cultural. So when I talk about cultural, we'll get into these a little bit more detail. Right plant, right place. Happy plants. All right. So, but it's important to always realize, set realistic expectations. You will never have 100% pest-free yard. It's an impossibility. So it's important to make sure that you set realistic expectations for yourself and your yard. Again, that's a very subjective term. It's a very, very subjective term. Some damage to plants is 100% natural. It's just going to happen. You cannot have those 100% perfect plants. If you do, submit them to the fair and those fun competitions. Those take a lot of work. But anyways, don't strive for a pest-free yard. Instead, decide on that realistic threshold of damage. So one insect that I always talk about is chinch bugs. You'll always have chinch bugs in your yard. But do you have a yard that's stressed in such a way which allows that population to flourish? Then it becomes a problem. So you're never going to have 100% pest-free yard. It's not possible. But make sure you set your own expectations as what you know or what you want that damage threshold to be. So, but the first thing is to always identify. That is the key. Identify what the problem actually is first, because that's going to allow us better understand management practices. What's this guy on the right? The little thing on the right. What is that creepy looking dude? Paula knows. I know Paula knows. That's a ladybug. That is a ladybug. And that ladybug is going to town eating aphids and other insects. And it looks kind of creepy. So when you see it walking around your milkweed or your other plants, you might think that that guy's problematic. But no, that guy's helping you out. So that is a ladybug nymph, and they're predating on some of the other insects. So it's important to understand what is the pest, what's causing the actual damage, because sometimes we'll look for we see one problem, but that problem is, and we identify it as the problem, but it's being caused by something else. Does that make sense? So a common example is, how many of you seen or familiar with sooty mold? Sooty mold, the black fungus that grows on plants. You know, we'll get calls. It's like, I have this fungus growing on plants. and it looks disgusting. It's just black film on everything. It's like, oh, well, that's not the problem. It's the insects that's producing all the waste. So that's sooty mold that grows on the poop of the insect waste. So in those situations, like, well, the mold's not the problem. Look for the insect that's causing that to grow, because that's where your problem actually lies. So making sure that we learn the differences between predators and prey. Not all insects are plant pests. Remember that maybe 1% are actually considered pests, and predators may be beneficial insects that control pest populations. And it's important about scouting. How often should we be looking when we're looking for when we're trying to identify what are the problems in our landscape? We always talk about scouting. We should be scouting about every week, 7 to 10 days, because it allows us to make sure that we're looking for possible insect damage, so we can identify the problem before it gets too big. Kind of what was mentioned already is, like, farmers might be looking more frequently for pests, but we should be at minimum looking at least once a week. Now, I'm not saying going around with a hand lens and getting up close and everything, but just part of your time in the yard, just walking around the yard, just look for anything that looks abnormal, because it's easier to manage a problem before it gets too out of control. So identification is going to be key. And if you have a pest problem or you're not sure what the pest problem is, you can always reach out to the county extension office and we can help with identification of the problems. So anyways, it's important to identification is priority. But a lot of times we will see that environmental stresses look very similar to insect and pest damage. So when we're looking at this photo, this is herbicide injury. So this is just a misused herbicide. It's caused some damage, but some people may look at it and be like, oh, I have something wrong with this. What's causing this problem? It's like, well, it was herbicide probably that happened a week ago or a few days ago. So we have a lot of plant stresses that can be caused by drought, nutrient deficiency, variations in soil pH, mechanical damage, cold damage, excessive watering or underwatering, excessive fertilizing. So there's a lot of problems that pop up in the landscape that are not pest related, but they are some type of environmental stress where the plant is reacting to it. So we always have to think, is like, well, we have to be honest with ourselves and say, did I cause this? Or what is happening in the environment that could have caused this to happen? Because a lot of times it's easy, like, oh, something looks bad, I'm gonna just put down an insecticide, even though you haven't found an insecticide. That's an insecticide misuse. So identification is key, because a lot of times we'll find most of the problems are going to be environmental related, not necessarily insect or disease related, or that we cause the problem. So it's important to think about prevention. How do we prevent things from happening in the first place? This is cultural controls. Right plant, right place. If we have happy plants in the landscape, they're being watered appropriately, they're getting the good amount of sunlight, soil drainage is perfect for them. Put those plants in the part of the landscape that they're going to thrive in, they'll be happier. It'll reduce their threat or their susceptibility to pest. So select pest-resistant plants, even in some situations, would be great. That decreases the likelihood that you'll need to spray or do any type of intervention. Most plants can withstand small pest populations. Not a big deal, but it's important to do that, inspect and scout regularly, at least once a week. But some of these cultural practices, so that base of IPM strategy, we always want to look at, like, how are we managing this? So avoid problems with insects and diseases through proper design, plant selection, and maintenance. Stress plants are more susceptible to attack or cannot outcompete other pests. And then so like looking in this photo, you have that raised bed. So the tree's probably gonna be a little stressed because you have that soil all piled right around the base of the tree. So that's gonna create a lot of problems for the tree. So that is something that was created that's gonna stress out the tree stressed out, in comes some pest, or the pest population can flourish. So, but a majority of landscape garden issues are honestly a result of mismanagement. I would say 99% of the problems that we have in our gardens is because we mismanaged it. So then the pest problem came in. So honestly, irrigation probably causes the majority of our landscape issues because we over irrigate. So general rule of thumb for all irrigation, turn your irrigation system off, completely off if you have a timer. If it's on manual, perfect, you're already set. Turn your irrigation system completely off and only run during times of drought. Your plants will thank you for it. The twice a week during the growing season and the once a week during the dormant season, that is the maximum threshold set by the water management district. So you cannot go more than that. But our recommendations is keep your system completely turned off unless your plants have show signs of drought, because there's a lot of plants that are in a landscape that love drought conditions. They thrive in drought conditions. So they actually less pest pressure. I've seen a lot of aphid and scale damage on Kunti palms. They get covered in sooty mold, they get covered in scale. And a lot of times what causes that is they're irrigated twice a week. And Kunti does not like being watered. They just, rainfall is enough. So it's really important, especially this time of year, our prime growing season, we're getting typically more than enough rain to manage our yards. And it's best to, if you have a couple plants that need some water, just hand water with the hose versus running an irrigation system if you have it. So it's important just to know that cultural practices, whenever there is a disease or a pest problem or something's wrong with a plant in the landscape, there might be ways where we have to jump in and do some type of chemical treatment right away, depending on the scenario. But it's always part of that discussion is like, what caused it to get there? Because if you don't fix the cultural problem, the pest problem will keep coming back. Does that make sense? Yeah. So always go back to cultural and be like, can I do something better managing it? Is something that's happening in the irrigation, fertilizer, or however you're managing that plant, can it be improved? Is it the right plant in the right place? So if we can make sure we're always trying to look at what those cultural practices are, it'll help the landscape thrive. But if we always jump to the chemical applications to control a pest, we'd need to always consider what those cultural controls are in those improvements to prevent it from happening again. So some of those other cultural practices, overhead irrigation spreads a lot of disease. Ideally, your ornamental beds have no overhead irrigation, zero. They should not be on the same zone as turf grass. Sometimes we have no say in that just because of how some of the homes are built. But the splashing water from leaf to leaf is a great way to spread disease. Another great way to spread disease is us. We spread a lot of our diseases, our pruning shears. If we don't clean them or sanitize them, if I'm messing with some sick leaves with my hands and then I move to the next plant and I start touching them, I'm spreading that disease. So when you're thinking about pest and disease in the landscape, treat it like you would if every plant that you're messing with has like a stomach bug, you know? So just assume it has a stomach bug and you don't want to spread it around, and just sanitize. It's important to clean because we spread a lot of those things. But overhead irrigation causes issues. Landscapes change. So have the environmental conditions changed that would stress out the plant? We see a lot with turf grass. Turf grass thrives, but guess what? These trees, as they grow and get older, start creating more shade. So then turf grass may end up not becoming the right plant in the right place, and it'll start getting stressed because the environmental conditions are no longer the same. Ventilation, make sure that there's proper airflow around plants. We see a lot of plants that are just stuck too close together, too close to buildings, and if there's not proper air, if air can't circulate, it stays wet and humid, and that perpetuates like fungus growth. So we need good air circulation. Don't overplant your landscapes. Sanitation, like I mentioned, just sanitize all your tools and equipment, prevent yourself from spreading, because I do believe that I think we spread majority of the diseases in our landscapes. So we like to point at the insects. We do have insects that spread diseases like white flies. Yeah, they love spreading diseases. But we spread a lot of them ourselves. So it's important to know that. So avoid overhead irrigation if possible. Irrigate only when needed. Think about those changing environmental conditions. What can we do to improve the management? Are we managing it properly? Sanitize and ventilation. Those will go a long way. But ultimately, it starts with right plant, right place. Yes?
What is the
preferred.
Pots, say,
Oh yeah,
what's the ratio?
I cannot remember the ratio for sanitizing pots. But yes, that is a concern. There's a lot of soil-borne pathogens that can stay on containers. And I think it's like a 90% isopropyl alcohol mix, but I can't remember the ratio with water. So I'll see if I can pull that up and I can share that. And usually just a quick dunk in that mixture is more than enough. People use bleach sometimes too, but usually the isopropyl alcohol I think has a better success. Yeah. So
Do you think that that the really strong vinegar would work?
the vinegar, no, I don't think, like the horticultural vinegar.
Like 30%.
Yeah, so the horticulture vinegar would not have an effect on killing viruses and fungus. So, a good question.
I have started, like you said, paying attention. I was using the same garden gloves or even a shirt that I put on for the sun,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to keep it off me. I'm using it a few times before I actually wash them.
Yeah.
Spread it everywhere.
Yeah. It's really easy for us to spread. Very easy for us to spread things. So like it's not just our gloves, but like what you just mentioned, like our clothes, our tools, and hats, anything that comes in contact with the plants can spread it. Like does anybody wear like those like garden gauntlets, like the long gloves? Those will spread them, you know, especially if you have agave. Or God help you if you're working with agave. So, but anyways, so one cool strategy as part of the Fortified Landscaping Program is cultural, how it relates to biological control, is really things like how can we, like cultural practices in our landscape, we can attract good things, but also deter other things. And deterrence is a great way for thinking about the marsh rabbits, you know, the larger things that your pesticides aren't necessarily going to go after. So I always think about like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like honestly, if you're thinking about what are the basic needs that these animals need, food, water, shelter, water, food, shelter, safety. If we can eliminate those for some of those nuisance species, that's going to deter them from wanting to come to the landscape. So there's some other strategies. But if we think about this for attracting beneficials to the landscape, but we can use this same strategy by removing to deter species, make it difficult for them to gain access to the space. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if we have the ability to try to identify what can we remove, and the hardest thing is the food portion, because a lot of our larger nuisance pests that come in, our plants are a great food source. And there's other very specific strategies that can be done. But our goal is, can we eliminate these to make it look less attractive to those pests? So then your neighbor's yard becomes more attractive. So they end up going there. So anyways, so you can do all this cultural practices all you want, but sometimes that's not always going to fix it. And that's okay. That's all right. But it's important to always think about cultural practices. But if your cultural practices aren't going to work, you can go to the physical or mechanical control. Remove pests by hand. If you see aphids on a milkweed, just squash them. If you see a leaf that has a fungus on it, just pinch that leaf off, toss it in the trash. Mischief managed, pest gone, you know? Scout regularly, because if the pest population is small, it's easy to do that physical and mechanical controls. The minute it takes over, that's when it gets harder. So that's why scouting is important. So remove infested parts, really easy. Again, if you're pinching plants that are sick, wash up. Yeah. Food exclusion. So yeah, it's like, how can you remove the food, or how can you happy bunny, sad gardener, or a happy gardener, sad bunny? So are there ways that we can create some type of exclusion mechanism that just makes it harder? So like one time I was working on a project that deer loved munching on everything. So what we did is we had motion sensor sprinklers around the part of the garden that we really liked that kicked on at night. So when the deer came in, it sprayed them all with water. It was great, and they ran off. But what we did is we planted like our our offering to the wildlife, like off to the side because we have plenty of space. Because we would just put the plants that they know like munching on. So then they would go there. We didn't put the sprinklers there. So we created a space that was more attractive to them that we didn't really manage. But it became a space like that's where they went and they left our good space alone. But again, we had the space to provide that. So think about food exclusion. Established barriers prevent pest access to the plants if possible. Yellow sticky paper attracts whiteflies and other insects, which is great. If you have snails that are wanting to come up your plants at night and munching your plants, put a rock down around your garden so then they hide there for protection of the sun. And then where the damage is happening, and in the middle of the day, just come in, lift up that rock, all your snails are there, and you can smoosh them. And problem solved, you know? Farmers do that. Farmers will drop pieces of plywood out in their fields, and they'll come out during the day and they'll lift it up, and a lot of the snails are causing problems are right there. And they don't have to put down the pesticide. They just, yeah, I mean, simple. It's great. So there's a lot of little tricks and things that you can do to help create traps, such as the sticky paper, et cetera. I've seen people just put down strips of duct tape, like at the bottom of a plant. So because they had it handy. So when an insect or whatever the problem was coming in, got stuck on that rather than trying to climb up the plant. So yes, ma'am.
Quick question based on what you just said with the rocks. So a lot of landscaping, they use those small little rocks. Does that bring in snails?
That's a really good question. So in a lot of landscapes we're using so the question was do the decorative rocks attract some of these snails to our landscapes and then bring that pest in? That's a very good question. I don't know, but I can definitely see that if that ends up becoming a place of protection, what wouldn't it keep them from coming in potentially or creating a habitat for them? Now, of course, for some of those like when we have those big areas of rocks, it's kind of stay put in a landscape. Usually that does just get really hot over time. So it does kind of create an inhospitable area. That's one reason we don't recommend using stone as mulch, because it dries out the soil very quickly. It damages root plants and all that stuff just because of the heat. So it may not necessarily attract them, but at the same time, with the same method, just putting something down to add that little bit of protection, I can also say, why not? So, but I don't know enough to answer that completely. That's a really good thought. So if our physical mechanical controls are not going to work, we can always think about beneficials. How do we attract beneficials? Here's our adult ladybugs going after aphids, munching away. So sometimes when you see those predators that are already going after the pest, you can say, my job is done. Yeah, they're your free pest control operator. If you see them happy, healthy in the landscape, bam. You just got to moderate, make sure that's still not going to get out of hand, because you may still have to control the population a little bit, but you're essentially creating an environment now. You're attracting these beneficials that they're going to be hanging out in your garden. So that's why always nice. A lot of gardeners will actually plant pollinator gardens with their raised bed gardens, because it attracts a lot of those beneficials in that help predate on a lot of those garden pests. So we're attracting in biological controls by creating an environment that provides, remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the food, water, shelter, safety for some of those really cool beneficial insects or predator species, not just insects like birds. We can attract them in, and they help control a lot of that pest problems as well. So, but it's important to, when we're thinking about attracting beneficials, so you can do this at any time pretty much as attracting beneficial insects to the landscape, but we can attract them, but it's important that we're going to avoid using harmful broad spectrum pesticides. Because the minute you start using those, you're going to impact, like I mentioned, you're going to hurt your beneficials. Provide food, nectar, pollen, plant diversity, help attract more beneficials to the landscape. Provide shelter. So think about layers in your landscape. Upper story, mid-story, ground cover, and all in between. That helps attract a more diverse population of those beneficial species. So, but anyways, so we can think about including predators, parasites, and pathogens in that biological control. So predators like our insects, but there are parasites that love going after some of our problematic species, like certain wasps They love tomato hornworms. They lay their eggs inside of a tomato hornworm, and essentially from the inside out, their eggs just like hatch and grow. It's creepy looking, but they manage that population really, really well. There's a lot of parasitic wasps that do magical, cool things. And the parasitic wasps are super tiny that when you see them, you're not going to think you're going to get stung by all means. You wouldn't even think about it as a wasp. But there's other pathogens that'll even come in and they'll manage a lot of those problem species. So it's important to think about when we're thinking about predators in general. Predators are present in relatively fewer numbers than their prey, which makes sense. Can kill large numbers of prey, generalists rather than specialists. So when we're talking about generalists rather than specialists as predators, things are like, I don't care, I'm just going to munch on all these pests. You can bring in some specialists for very specific insects, but if we're thinking about just trying to track just general predators, you'll be successful. So, and a lot of times we'll find that the insects can be social creatures, and that can allow us to kind of even identify some of those problem species. So wasps and ants. So ants can be problematic, but in like greenhouses, ants are great indicators of aphids. Ants are little cowboys. To put it that way, they'll actually raise and tend aphids like livestock. Honestly, because they harvest the honeydew or the waste from the aphids because it's really rich in sugar. And then they can take that back to the nest. So you'll see if you can follow ants into your plants, you might find aphids. And they literally are raising and taking care of those aphids because the benefits that they get from them. So you can look for some of these social creatures and they can even lead you on this little clue to find the pest. It's neat. It's cool. But anyways, but it's important. But there are things like ants can still also be a nuisance. Fire ants, tiny crazy ants especially, can be a nuisance species. So wasps can also be beneficial and pests, depending, especially if they congregate in the wrong place. So some of those really neat wasps, have you ever seen predate on, I can't remember which specific, it's like some are solitary bees and wasps. You can see them fly into a garden and they will pick up a caterpillar and they'll carry it off. Yeah. Like a little hawk. Yeah. So it's really important that these things that are beneficial or predator species, we can equally kind of say, depending on the context, they can be pests as well. So subjectivity. So here's another great example. Snakes are great. So honestly, I don't like having an unintended run-in with a snake like anyone else does. But when we start looking at some of the snakes in our landscape, they are so vital for a lot of our pest control. Rats, like marsh rats, are really bad on Amelia Island. Snakes love them. So and sometimes I always get the concern of like, I have a snake in my house, or I think there's a snake in my house. Don't be concerned about the snake in your house. It's what they followed into your house. You probably heard me say that before. But I call these guys the pest control operator. I probably told y'all before, like my parents have a rat snake that lives in their cul-de-sac, and everyone knows this rat snake. And it's really funny because you can always tell if there's a snake in the shrubs, because rat snakes are great. The black racers are great. They're hanging around your house. Those are the ones we typically have run-ins with, but they are managing the pest around, the larger pest around your property. And you can always tell when there's a black racer nearby in your garden because all the lizards are up on the building. Honestly, yeah, when you see all the brown anoles hanging out on the wall of the building, look for the snake. They're usually in the shrubs and you might see their heads sticking out looking around. So yeah, but there are times like in Nassau County though, we're urbanizing county. So there is still conflicts that we have with venomous species, water moccasins. I mean, they're everywhere, of course, but pygmy rattlesnakes, which are like the chihuahuas of the snake world, they're feisty. The timber rattlesnakes on the west side of the county get ginormous. They're creepy, but usually that conflict is only really happening when we have that urbanization, that growth coming into those natural areas, because they got to figure out where to go all of a sudden. So, but it's important to note that snakes are very beneficial, not even venomous or non-venomous. In Florida, we just kind of live with them, but they're great, especially if we know we have that black racer or that rat snake hanging around our house. they're great to have in your garden. Yes.
I've got a built-in alarm system. I hear a scream in the backyard.
When you hear Barbara screaming, snakes about. Yeah.
She's in the house right now.
So other ones. Yeah. Wolf spiders, huntsman spiders. Oh, Laura in our office the other day caught a wolf spider that just had the clutch of eggs. Yeah. So the wolf spiders, when they have their clutch of eggs, once they all hatch, all the babies climb on mama's back. And there's hundreds of little baby spiders all just hanging out, being happy campers. So, and if you ever squish a mama that has all the babies on the back, you will know, because it's like an explosion of baby spiders. So just but this is an example of a huntsman spider. They are not interested in us, but they are large predatorial spiders. They don't really have typical webs like you think of. They're huntsmen because they hunt their prey, and they are quick. They are super quick. I can tell you about my experiences another time with huntsman spiders. So I used to have them in my old house. We had one that lived on our back patio. His name was Gary. That was his space. But more so, it's like when we see these, they're after something else. There's a food source that they're going after. And because of where we lived, we had a lot of huntsman spiders because we lived in it was in High Springs. It was a very natural area. So we had a lot of like palmetto bugs, not necessarily in the house, but just like we had a lot of natural area around us. So it was a great environment for huntsmen to hang out. So Gary was happy and fed. But we can also look for parasites. So parasites, we can look for signs. So you can see where tomato hornworm has been parasitized. It's like this little, looks like rice is growing out of the hornworm. But also the wasp will actually lay eggs on aphids. If you see a yellow aphid, they're healthy. If you see a red aphid, it's been parasitized, and you don't have to worry about it. Only concern yourselves with the yellow ones. So when you see a red one, you can be like, all right, I can stop. And all right, I can stop. If you see red, stop. If you see yellow, proceed with caution. So, but anyways, so there's ways that we can look for parasite damage. And this is so much that's just having a diverse yard will attract parasites you'll never see, but they'll manage a lot of those pests for us.
What was that?
So that is actually some of the, you will have the parasites will, like the wasp will lay eggs on plants, but also sometimes they'll lay their eggs inside other eggs. And then they'll take over the inside. Yeah, so it's neat. So yeah, Mother Nature's cool. So other things is like we have pathogens, naturally occurring diseases, bacteria, fungus, all those things that we concern ourselves with. Insects and pests get them too. So it's often specific to host though. So there is a lag time. The infestation doesn't mean immediate control. You're going to see a delay in it. So, but a great example that we use as a biological control is BT. So BT is a common soft body insect pesticide that is a bacteria, Bacillus. So the Bacillus is Bacillus thuringiensis, but we used to say BT. Even the labels will say it's a big B and a little lowercase t. That essentially gets in all those soft body insects like caterpillars, and it just essentially from the inside out, the bacteria eats holes in their digestive system. So great control. They won't develop a resilience to it, which is wonderful. So we can introduce some of these pathogens as well into the landscape to help manage some of these pests. So, and that's a swallowtail caterpillar. So for most, that's a common, citrus trees are its host plant. So they're not really a problematic, but sometimes when you have a small tree and you have dozens of swallowtail caterpillars on it, they will completely defoliate the citrus. So sometimes it's nice. It's like if you have a huge population, you can just hand pick them out. Pick them, drop them in a thing of soapy water, managed. Thin the population, but you can still have some there so they can become the vital butterflies that we need or pollinators that we need. Balance. So there's some other biological controls that can help just persuade pests to go somewhere else. Gaillardia, milkweeds, goldenrod, echinacea, sunflower, clover, cilantro, dill, fennel, mustards, all these different plants. You can just create a pollinator garden and you'll be good. You'll manage a lot of the pests, or you'll help attract a lot of those predatory species that can then manage them. So even this guy, don't hate on this guy. So Biden's alba, great attracting a lot of our predatory and beneficial insects. So, all right. So in chemical applications are your last resort. They are if I have to, I can change, or if I can apply chemical applications or chemical controls as a last resort, if I must, I guess. So, but sometimes major pest damage reaches to an unacceptable level where none of the other control mechanisms work. We do have some very noxious weeds that there are no good physical or biological controls. There are none. So some things, it's the only thing that can impact this are chemical controls, which really stinks. So, but our goal is to go through cultural, physical, mechanical, biological, chemical, if I have to. So, sometimes major pest damage reaches a level that's unacceptable. If all previous management efforts are ineffective, this is when you can apply them. But also think about, remember that the least sustainable practice is typically often requires multiple treatments. So usually the chemical applications, you might have to do multiple treatments to get full control. So there are no real insect preventers. Herbicide pre-emergent, more effective in some conditions. But it's always important that anytime that we are doing any type of application in the landscape, read the label. Label is law. It'll tell you where to apply it, how to apply it, when to apply it. So if you call the extension office and say, hey, how can I put down this herbicide or this pesticide? I'll say, read the label. The label is the law. It really is the law. Anything outside of that is technically you're breaking the law. So really is. But make sure you're always storing all your pesticides in cool, dry places, away from pets, children. If possible, make sure it stays locked up. So, but always choose least harmful pesticides. If possible, spot treat only or use as needed. Big blanket applications are typically ineffective because you're putting a lot of pesticides down in areas that don't actually need it. So only put it down where the problem is existing. Use selective pesticides rather than broad spectrum pesticides. So your goal is to find a pesticide that's there's a specific pest. So I want to make sure I find an insecticide or an herbicide or whatever it might be that specifically targets that pest if possible. So when I say something that's very a broad spectrum pesticide, a great example would be glyphosate. It just kills everything. So that's a broad spectrum pesticide. So, but avoid the shotgun approach. And that's where you spray everything, spot treat only. Only spot treat where needed. Follow the label. The label is the law, all right? Label is the law. Here's a cheat sheet. For homeowners, this can manage majority of our issues when we're talking about chemical applications. So always remember your IPM strategies. But horticultural oils, such as neem oil, extracts, that's a great example. Insecticidal soaps work wonderful. Don't do Dawn dish soap. Don't do that. Don't do it. No dish soap. Has to be horticultural soap because of salts. There's a lot of salts in the dish soap, and that's going to hurt your plants more than help them. So then we think about biopesticides, BT, like we mentioned. There's parasitic nematodes, ladybugs. We do have someone that mentioned is can you buy ladybugs? Is it okay to? Yes, you can, but sometimes there are actually some invasive ladybugs. I don't want to say invasive. I don't know if they're actually considered invasive, but we do have some nuisance ladybug species, and they can be the ones that you get mail in. So it's important that you know what species you're actually bringing in. So wasp, but also, a strong stream of water. Your thumb over your hose can do a lot of damage to a pest problem on plants. Just knock them off. Scale insects is a great example. Once the scale insect is attached, you can't spray them off, but scale insect, if they are not attached and you spray them with a hose, they'll fall to the ground And guess what? They can't get back up. So it's great. And there's a lot of times we'll put down a pesticide to manage some of our insects. Scale's a great example. Once it dies, it can still be dead just on the plant. So you'll still see the dead pest there, but it's not actually active. So it's always nice to like rinse off plants anyways to kind of see who's still alive, who's still attached, etc., and just re-inspect. But then also I always joke that your shoes are a great way to just smash the pest. Honestly, physical mechanical control. That's the easiest. Like I know it's gross when you think about, well, you know, I got aphids or caterpillars. It's easy just to smash them real quick or pick up the caterpillar and toss it into soapy water. Done, you know? So, but usually when there is a big pest population, like say like caterpillars specifically, check the underside of the leaves, make sure there's not more eggs that are gonna hatch. So look for the eggs of that species and you can just smash the eggs and that's gonna fix most of it. So, or relocate it depending on the species. Or give them the babs. Babs will raise them. But there's important to think about like nuisance species in our homes as well. We're almost done. Remember, what is a pest? Exclusion. Wire grate over a lot of these openings and pipes on our homes is a great way to deter them from getting inside our property. Even like little tiny cracks in our like sub foundations or pony walls that we may have, the tiniest little thing, rats and mice and all those things can get inside. So it's worth inspecting, walking around your home. Do I have any of these tiny openings that I need to close up? Like little spray foam can insulation stuff that's great on some of those like tiny little cracks. But some of the big issues where we see insects getting in and out is like your outdoor, your air compressor, where your coolant lines all go in, the power lines go inside the house. That gap in between the wall or the building and the pipe, they can get in and out of there. So make sure that that's sealed because a lot of people forget about that. Usually they're sealed when they're installed, but anyways, elimination of food sources. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I can just eliminate the basic needs, they're not going to want to be there. It will not be attractive. There'll be no benefit of them coming in. Trapping and shooting is possible, depending on what it is. Species and location dependent. So armadillo, if you capture them, you actually have to release them within like 5 miles of where you caught them because of disease to prevent spreading disease up to the other populations of armadillo. So, but make something more attractive. In agriculture, we use trap crops. Like I mentioned about the deer earlier, we put something out a little bit further that was more attractive, easier for them to get to. We can do that same idea in our landscapes. A trap crop attracts them to one spot, so it's easy to manage them in that one spot rather than being spread out, causing damage in other places. So, remind us, what is a pest? It's that annoyance. It's that annoyance in the landscape. Whether invasive or non-invasive, native, non-native, doesn't really matter. It can be something that we consider a nuisance to ourselves in our garden, that annoyance. And we can use integrated pest management to kind of understand how do I actually manage this effectively. But remember, it's prevention first, intervention last. And when we have to do that chemical application, remember, can I still improve how I'm managing it to prevent that problem from happening again, right? So in that specific situation, you know, say you have a leaky pipe in your ceiling, you can definitely mop up the puddle on the floor, right? Or put a bucket under the drip, but the drip's still there. So same thing with our landscapes is we can intervene and do things as needed, but unless we fix that leaky pipe or the problem that's leading to that leaky pipe, it won't get better, all right? So, any questions? Yeah.
Our neighbors have a vegetable garden and a yard service, and they're often spraying on windy days.
Oh, wow.
I'm concerned about them eating some of the vegetables. Plus, I've got herbicide damage from drift in the night.
Oh, wow. So one of the questions brought up is, yes, sometimes we will have professional services. And one of the concerns that we do have with pesticide use is drift. Drift is when essentially we're putting out pesticides at too high of a pressure, there's a couple reasons it calls drift. So drift is just when the pesticide is carried away from a non-target area. Drift can occur because we are too much pressure behind the nozzle. So it creates much finer, smaller droplets that love to get carried. Think about fog. Fog is just fine mist. And if we put overpressurized pesticides, we're essentially creating like a pesticide fog, and it can drift for miles, potentially. Another way, even if we're having good or pressure on our application, wind. We need to be very cautious about windy days because that wind will push that pesticide to other non-target areas. And in this situation, where someone is a professional management company is spraying ornamentals, but on windy days, that can easily work its way into a raised vegetable garden, which could be very toxic to that homeowner or the people consuming that. So it's very important that we talk about how to make sure that we're educating, how to make sure that we're licensing appropriately, because everybody that's spraying pesticides has to be licensed through FDACs. So it's really important because, again, that is a conflict or an impact of pesticide misuse, is a mistargeted or that drift that can occur because I might be spraying something to contain the pest in this spot, but that drift is carrying it 5-10 feet away. That is impacting what I eat. And that's important because if that pesticide is not labeled to be applied in a vegetable garden, that's really bad. So very bad.
So should they check, call their management company and say,
yes,
what are you spraying?
Exactly. So if it just as for any recommendation, anybody that has a green industry professional that you have that's putting down fertilizers, pesticides, whatever it might be, as a consumer, it's worth it for you to know exactly what they're putting down, what rates, and just be aware of that. So yeah, because we saw yesterday a really unique pesticide application I've been wanting to look. I haven't looked up yet. So there's a pesticide that's like a application system that's set up to like a leaf blower. So it's a really fine mist, all just getting sprayed over. Yeah, it could have just been that specific context may have been appropriate with the type of pesticide, but I've never seen that before. So, but anyways, other questions? Yes.
Do you have what's the half-life on, I mean, generally speaking, on pesticides, like insecticides in particular for fire ants? I had a fire ant situation in a raised bed. I tried boiling water. I tried disturbing them, hoping that they would kind of move. They didn't, and I used the granulated stuff that you put out that they take to, but it's in my raised bed. So how long before I'm going to be able to use that, or do I just need to empty out all the soil and start over?
Very good question. So the question is there a half-life associated with pesticides? So if you end up putting a pesticide down in this specific situation that you had in a vegetable garden, how long do you have to wait until it's safe to use again? It's very dependent off the type of active ingredient or the specific chemical or pesticide. But on every single label, it'll tell you how long you have to wait.
I didn't see anything on that.
Okay.
And it may be because it's for fire ants, and typically you use that particular product on places where you're not growing things.
Yeah.
I might have just missed it, but I don't.
Yeah.
I think maybe because it wasn't for hornworms or something like that you typically have in a vegetable garden.
Yeah.
The other question is, if I can't use it for vegetables, I need to do a little more research. But if I can't use it for vegetables this coming fall, what is can I plant for pollinators? And is that going to affect, is that going to be something that gets into the pollen of the plants that I'm putting in there that will then affect pollinators?
So great question. So you want to think about a pollinator garden, but then you're concerned about when do I plant it? How do I make sure if I'm putting down some type of insecticide that I'm minimizing damage to non-target species like pollinators?
Right.
Correct?
In particular, it's the fire ant.
Oh, okay.
That I put down, but I decided, if I can't do vegetables, then maybe I'll plant just some flowers.
I gotcha.
Plants,
yeah.
But I don't want to poison the pollinators that are going to come to the flowering plants either.
So that's a very good question. And on the labels, it'll tell you what type of expected impact can be a result of using that specific insecticide. And with granular bifenthrin, that's typically used for fire ants, I don't think that there's a concern about that residual activity. But some of the biggest concerns that we think about with putting down pesticides, and we have a pollinator garden or a vegetable garden, is we're thinking about when do the insects forage. So insects are when, and how do we make sure that we're timing? It's like, when's that forage time for a lot of those bees and butterflies? Make sure we're not applying then. But then also, there are some pesticides that if you look at it for like a vegetable garden or ornamental garden, it'll say to protect pollinators, do not apply while they're flowering.
Okay.
Or like when they're expect the flower, so that residual doesn't end up in the pollen. So you will actually look at the labels and it'll say, don't apply during this time. Otherwise you can impact non-target species such as pollinators. And again, it's so dependent off of the pesticide and active ingredient. But it's a very good question. But yeah, it's, believe it or not, I know some people, you might be like timid to open up the labels on the pesticides in the store. Do it. Don't buy anything that you don't think is going to work. That's not going to work for your target species, because you want to make sure that it's going to be successful. So, you know, a previous example is someone had some sedge issues. They went and got a sedge control, didn't read the label. You know, it didn't kill anything. Like, it literally didn't kill anything because that specific sedge control wasn't a control for that specific sedge. Yeah. So it's like it wasn't properly identified and they just bought something in general and it didn't work. So it's a waste of money, time, energy, and you put down pesticides that essentially had zero impact. So that's a huge, that's not a good thing. So identification is key in that situation, but really making sure that we're taking time to read the labels. And I know some stores probably don't like when you start looking through them, but I want to make sure I'm buying the right product.
You almost have to look online because the writing, even with like,
It's so tiny.
it's so
Yeah.
small.
Take a magnifying glass with you so you can read the label. Yeah. So, but sometimes it is worth like just doing investigation beforehand. It's like, I have this pest. What are the labeled ingredients or pesticides or the best management practices, IPM strategies for this pest? And with our recommendations on that you can find online, as well as like University of California has some really cool recommendations, and Clemson as well have really cool IPM strategies for a lot of pests that will tell you best physical control, best biological control. If you're doing chemical controls, what type of chemicals work best and at what dilution rate you need to put those at if you're having to mix them. So it's those are great resources because it allows you, it's like, okay, this is what I need. Let me go find out what common products I can find that have this, or at least you can walk into the store and you know what you're looking for. You know what I mean? So it does help tremendously.
I've done some research where one extension university says one thing and another university.
Yeah.
This one will say there is no control, and this one will say this is a control. Is that because they've not done as much research, or I mean, how do you decide?
That's a very good question. So some extension resources, they may say, hey, here's the control for it, but then you can go to another extension website and they'll say, no, there is no control for it. So which one do we pick? So the best thing is always to think about geographic region, because pesticide success can be influenced about where you're at. So a resource from like northern United States, they may have some really cool control mechanisms for chemical applications. It just may not work for us. So it's best to try to look at Florida extension recommendations first. But if we don't have it, which we don't always do, it's best to look at some of those other local resources or in like the Southeast. So like Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama usually can find some pretty decent resources. And if you need help sifting through it, just reach out to our office and we can help identify it. Because yes, you will find conflicting information, but there's so many nuances that go into it. It's just a matter of how do we make sure we're selecting the best one.
Sometimes
Or it's just like publication dates are so different. Like, yeah.
I look at the most
try to find the most recent, because we have sunset rules with all of our publications. So if something isn't updated within 6 years, it gets sunset. So it's important to look at when was that original publication, because we could have put something out even 4 years ago, where all of a sudden it's like, well, here's our new recommended practice. So a great example is citrus greening. Within the past few years, we've developed new recommendations for citrus greening, but we still have publications out there because they haven't been sunset that says if you have citrus greening, cut down your citrus tree. You know, we've been trying to remove those. So pretty much most of those are gone because the new recommendations have been updated, but still, since it's still within that sunset clause as an example. So it's important to look for the most up-to-date one as well. Make sure you use the most up-to-date information. Because there are even times where our recommendation is do this, but then we actually have science that says, oh, never mind, that doesn't work. So, so it's like reset, yeah, back to the drawing board. So great question. Great question. All right. Any more questions? Are there any questions online? All right. Well, I'll keep the chat box open online for a few more minutes, but I want to thank everybody for joining us today in person and online. And remember, I'm going to post this up onto our YouTube channel, and I'll send a follow-up email to everybody that registered. But if you didn't register and just kind of tuned in, or at least online, but you're here in person, you can find all of our webinars online on YouTube. So we post all of Nassau County Extension on YouTube, and you can find all of our webinars from the past, or majority of our webinars from the past. So thank you all. Have a, yes, ma'am.
Your armadillo there gave me well, I've heard that they're carrying a disease now.
Yeah. So armadillos do have diseases. One of the big one that's always a concern that people think about is leprosy. So our native armadillo is a 9-banded armadillo, and they carry leprosy. So it's always a concern for people, but there has been no reported transmission between armadillos and humans. So
that disease isn't getting into your garden.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, armadillos are not going to be contaminating our garden or environment. So a very good question. That's a common concern because armadillos do carry leprosy. I believe it's leprosy. Remember that correctly? Yeah, leprosy. So yeah, and there might be other diseases. That's the only one I can think of right now. Because I mean, wild animals. So, or all animals. But thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Stay nice and cool. Try your best to. Oh, I did get a question online. So you can tune out if you need to break out, go for it. But it had to do with the best suggested way to treat mealybugs. It can be difficult, and it can be very plant specific. There are, you can just smush them, like I mentioned, for small populations, no problem. But there are some chemical applications that can be used in ornamental plants that can help with manage them. But there are some plants that can get mealybugs that you just can't manage. And a great example is the mealybugs for muhlygrass. So it doesn't matter if it's sick or if it's healthy. If your muhlygrass gets mealybugs, it honestly is very tough to manage and control them. It's best to just cut them back or replace the muhlygrass. Because luckily muhlygrass is pretty cheap. But mealybugs can be very specific for plant type, but they can be pretty difficult to control sometimes. So.
Do they have to be sprayed directly? I mean, because most of them are pollinator plants, so you don't want to be systemic because you have to make contact.
So for a lot of those biological controls, if you're using that for mealybugs, it has to be direct contact. But if it's a systemic that you put down like as a soil drench, it's going to get absorbed. So that is a benefit. So if you can do the direct contact, because neem oil will work on mealybugs, but you'll have to, and same with scale, but you'll just have to use multiple applications. But it has to come in contact with them. So the hardest time is typically if you have mealybugs or scale insect on trees, trying to get into the canopy if they're out of your reach. So that's when it gets difficult. Yeah.
In my experience dealing with mealybug, the best thing is scouting for it. And as soon as you see it, pluck off the offending. If you get it soon enough, that's a more effective control than trying to because it spreads so quickly and they do have to be targeted directly.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just easier to break off that little piece of the plant.
Yeah, scouting is going to be best for mealybug control because they do grow very quickly. We've had a lot of Walters viburnum come into the office the past few weeks, and they all had mealybug, all from different locations. It's just unique. Yeah, I got a cool new microscope in the office. Some of you have probably seen it. I love showing it off. It's been really fun because someone will bring in a plant sample like the Walters viburnum, and the microscope has a screen. So then I put the plant sample under it and we can look at the mealybugs crawl around on the plant sample. So, yeah. Hello, everybody. My computer died, but luckily it was at the end. I'm gonna make it so now you can unmute yourself since it's just for the Master Gardener part and start video, etc. So you should be able to share. So I do apologize. Literally the computer just died. The extension cord wasn't plugged on or it wasn't turned on. And I didn't notice it. We're gonna get started in a minute.
Just hope.
All right. So. Happy Wednesday.
Ditto. Ditto.
Yep. Ditto. All right, so let's kick off the meeting. I'll go over the quick announcements, and if there's any announcements from the floor or anything, we can make sure that we're addressing or making sure we announce, because I want to make sure that we announce the updates, because I saw your email about next month. So, but anyways, so again, thank you everybody for signing in. It was brought up. Oh, the sign in's still in the back, so I'll make sure we get that. I always like doing the updates for civil rights and equal opportunity. So I know, for when we do stuff that's like internal, like when we do the sign-in sheets, I know I pretty much have everyone's demographics. It's not like a huge deal, but even for these public events, just make sure that we're filling out that information if possible. You're not required by all means, but the biggest thing is just making sure at least you sign in. So when we have those, because we track all of that information for how many people come to programs. Are we making sure that we're providing enough information, like we're meeting our parity requirements, et cetera. So civil rights, we always make sure that we are trying to adjust with all of our programs as part of a land grant institution. So next is with MGV training is right around the corner, believe it or not. Sheesh. So, but the training this year is planning to start on September 11th. That's a like first meeting kickoff that we do, like welcome to the program, woo! And it's going to run till November 13th. Remember, November 13th is our November like planning meeting that we do as a big group. That's not actually a Landscape Matters Day, so that's going to be their first day with us in like a meeting space per se. And our next meeting is actually on September 11th too. So as well. The application deadline for the Master Guard Volunteer Program this year is July 17th. So it's just right around the corner. We're getting some applications in, and then the interviews are going to be August 5th through August 9th. So Robin and I are going to help coordinate and get that sign-up information. We usually try to get everybody towards the beginning of the week, just easier for scheduling, so we're not having to stretch it out too much. But yeah, those interviews are scheduled that week, right now, August 5th to August 9th. And then we'll make our final selections like by the end of that week and notify everybody. So
In the newsletter, I put the applications were due by the end of July.
oh, you put applications through the end of July?
So, I don't know. if
That's
gonna
fine.
impact anything.
It's really, I just say publicly July 17th, but we will have applications that inevitably always come in late. And I'm not really a big concern. As long as like when I start scheduling interviews, that's when they need to be in ultimately.
If she hasn't sent out the newsletter, I can change it real quick. today.
She already sent it out this morning.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, so not a big deal. I don't worry about it. Yeah.
So how many
People don't read
bodies
it.
are you looking for? How many people?
I don't do more than 15,
Okay.
but quality over quantity.
Yeah.
So we do know, like, this is actually a discussion that Sarah, Robin, and I had yesterday. Is like the first 2 years we had a lot of people come through, but we're thinking about like coming out of the pandemic. There's a lot of people that just been waiting for a while to do the training. So we've had a lot of people that were waiting. So we don't have a huge amount of people that applied so far this year, but I think what we're doing is getting to more of a normal amount of applicants for Nassau County, which is good. But then at the same time, when I've been looking at the applications we have been getting, the applications we have in are really good. So I'm pretty pumped. So, and what's awesome is a lot of our applicants are coming from you all, which is really cool. Because to me, it's like, well, if you all are recommending them, that means that you know that they're going to be valuable to this, that they're going to, I don't want to say fit in with the group, but they will be able to work well with the group. And your recommendation for people applying weighs heavily into decision making. So, which is really cool. So thank you all for those that have given recommendations. So, but anyways, so yeah, we max at 15, absolute, just because that's just my mental capacity. But we have, I think, 7 applications currently. Holly Klein, our office manager, is going to take the training as well. And Kelly's your son? Did you talk to your son? Kelly's son, May. Oh, really? So, but anyways, so but Holly, I'm not making pay to go through. She's gonna, I'm just gonna pay for her out of my program account. Just because it's really nice, because Laura's gone through the training in the past. Laura may just do it again anyways, because it's been a long time since Laura's done it. Oh yeah, so we'll see if Laura can do it. She still has her volunteer badge, you know, she keeps hung up. But I think Holly wants to just learn more and have more of that experience of what's happening within my program area, so then she can also help clients, especially when they come into the Callahan office. She knows how to point them to appropriate resources. So, which is really exciting. But anyway, so the training's coming up. And Sarah and Robin have been working diligently on a new manual, MGV manual, and it's going to be really nice. So we're trying to make sure as we have the passport for all the interns, we have the mentor manual, and then we're going to have the MGV manual, and they're all going to make sure that they all connect. They're all the same type of resource, and they all are reflected well on better impact as well. So we're creating like SOPs. Well, Sarah and Robin have been creating SOPs. And we're gonna be working with a couple other master gardeners, like, can you help give us some feedback on this? And then we're just making this kind of like a first draft, because we want to make sure that we can give this manual out. When was our internal deadline for giving out the manual?
Well, yeah, we talked about the first annual meeting in November.
Okay, so that planning meeting in November, yeah. So that's our goal.
There'll be some review process, so I'll be reaching out to the chairs of different committees and say, hey, could you look at this specific, like Adele wrote the cat parenting procedures, so we integrated that into the plant sale.
Yeah, so our goal is to have this manual that covers all the common questions, how to record hours, policy for the master gardeners, because everything like lives online, but we want to kind of create something that is more tailored to Nassau County's program. So it's an undertaking, not the most exciting project per se when you're thinking about gardeners and we're creating a manual, but it's going to be so valuable. So I appreciate the work that they've been putting into this. It's going to be really helpful for all of us. Make sure that you enter all CEUs and hours on Better Impact. And what I always say is, if you're not sure where it goes, find the best fit. At the end of the day, I'm just looking at your hours. You know, for CEUs, make sure they're underneath that CEU continue education header and Better Impact. But all your volunteer hours, if you're like, well, I went to tabling, but I don't actually see the activity under tabling, there's the other. There's an other underneath every single category, where if it's like you can't find the best category within that like project area, then you can just go to other, enter your hours, and just type in a tiny description of what you did. Done. So that just kind of helps make sure Better Impact stays a little cleaner and from your perspective, the user end. So yes.
I can add something. If you are confused by something on Better Impact, we're trying to make it integrate, as Taylor said, with Fast Forward and the guidebook that we're working on. But I, as a new user, remember being a little confused where things went. So we want to help, especially the new folks coming in, feel comfortable using it. So if you have ideas, send them to me, Sarah, and Taylor.
Yeah.
Work on that.
Absolutely. All right. So upcoming events. Our 4-H camp is next week. Yeah, it's next week. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be busy. It's going to be hot. And it's going to be with a bunch of 5 to 7-year-olds. So Godspeed to us. So no, but we're really excited. The Let's Bug Out camp, the committee that's been planning this has put together a really good program that we will not be short of things to do. One of the cool things that we've all been, more so me, I've been really excited about is we've been practicing doing epoxy pours of insects. So, because we want all the kids to like leave with their own little preserved insects that they catch. We're going to go to different parts of the county. We're going to go to Cary State Forest on the west side of the county one day, and we're going to be at Simmons Park another day so they can learn about see how insects may differ in different environments. They can learn about insect parts. I mean, everything. We have music, games, you name it, they're going to be busy. So that committee, last year, the Get Up and Grow camp for the same age group was fantastic. And pretty much the same group is putting together a camp this year. And I think it's going to be equally as fun and fantastic. So, yeah, that's going to be going on. So you probably won't get a hold of me too much next week because that's a busy week. But anyways, some of the trainings that we have for you all, I've sent a couple emails out. They're on the calendar. So like yesterday, we had the FFL site recognition training. That was like part 2 of the statewide training. And I don't mind, we can do that training again, but it's a great way to learn. How do you do site recognitions? We actually went to Highland Dunes. Joanne's the park at Highlands Dune that Joanne helped with the team that got that certified or recognized as gold FFL. So we went out there and walked through the checklist, and I talked about like my nuances that I have with it. So it was a good training, but some of the other ones that we have coming up. So how do we actually, a lot of us do a lot of community education, community outreach for like the Speakers Bureau through Landscape Matters, community presentations. So I have a curriculum that me and a couple of extension agents built. How many of you did Speaking Easy? Adele, you did Speaking Easy. Sue, we modified it. It's a little different than when we did it. So I have on July 30th at Minor Road from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. a training for anybody that wants to do, like if you're doing community education, how do we put together programs, effective programs? You're not going to have to do presentations like we did during the other thing. It's just a one thing. But anyways, so that's on July 30th. If you're part of the Speakers Bureau, do presentations, I recommend coming if possible. It's not a requirement, of course. It's just a training to help us be better educators. So July 30th.
That's this building and development.
So the building and developing community education programs. Yeah. Because it's not going to be a class on how do I put together a PowerPoint, but it's going to be a class on how do I create a program, an educational program that meets the goals or objectives. Does that make sense? Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. So, but just because this then would translate to not just doing here I am, I'm talking to you all, but creating a program where you're going to a demonstration garden or you're doing hands-on activities. So this is any type of education that we do. This is the foundation of creating educational outreach community programs.
You said that's Minor Road?
Minor Road, yeah. No, I'm not going to record it just because there's so much activity. It's not going to be worth recording. So it's predominantly all hands-on, not all hands-on, but a lot of it's hands-on. There are some video modules that we've already pre-recorded with the team, but I can send those out, but we have documents and like little worksheets and all that stuff. So, yeah. Yes, Pam.
Is there any other classes or events that we have to do for the Florida Friendly Landscape?
So for the recognition, technically the state did the online training. The online training and that in-person like we did yesterday, that's their true requirements to do recognitions, not necessarily to do site visits or anything like that. So if you've done both of those, you're good to go for recognitions.
Okay.
Yeah. And if because you did the online, is that correct, Pam?
Yes.
Kelly, you didn't do online yet, but you went yesterday. So I'll have to just see if we can find that link. I think the state has that link recording saved, so I can send it out. So you can at least do that first part. So, all right. And then on August 14th, help desk training, because I know a lot of you still need to do some of your help desk hours. So I want to do just like a 2-hour training. We're going to just do troubleshooting, some examples, try to just demystify it a little bit. So that's just going to be a 2-hour training on August 14th.
Is that going to be online or?
It's going to be at the office. Yeah, I find it'll be better at the office. Yeah. So, so our next plant sale is October 5th at Minor Road. The garden chats have been going great. There's no activities in July. So thank you all for helping plan and organize those. I really appreciate it. Do you want to give an update on, I just have the Amelia Makery
Yeah.
with a question mark, but you have an update on that already.
Nothing for July, but in August, we're going to Amelia. Ceramic hummingbird tile. It'll be on the calendar later and also
What day is it again?
it's the 20.
It'll be limited to about what, 20? About what she has room there, so look on the calendar and we'll have you able to sign up. We have been getting really good. I think I counted like 17 people. Thanks to Sue and Jean for hosting this last month.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you.
And we were before, but we also had, I don't know if we talked about the pond tour at all. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Because of course, all the master gardeners on the pond tour were more interested in the plants than the ponds. Which was really true. Hotter than bejesus. I mean, it was bad. I almost fell out. We had other ones that were real close too. So.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why we opted for really out of July, because it's really hard to find a place to stay.
And who wants to go outside in this time of year in July? Yeah. I have a golf tournament on Sunday that I'm kind of afraid to play in.
I don't like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much. So that's not on Better Impact yet, but I will make sure that we put the Better Impact for Amelia Makery August 23rd at 10 a.m. RSVP, because there's a maximum of how many people that can go. It's 22 people, correct? Yeah. So Landscape Matters. Again, we have the second Wednesdays of each month. Next month will be at Minor Road Extension Office. But I can't remember next month's topic. I can't remember next month's topic. What is it? Attracting beneficial. Perfect. So Paula is going to be presenting on attracting beneficial insects. If you're having issues finding the links, we have all the links for every Landscape Matters this season on the Nassau County blog page. I have the link in the minutes or the agenda that I sent out, but you can go on there and you can see the dates and the times and the registration link for every single one of those. And you all should be, I'll double check. I always make sure that we double check, should be on the listserv as well, the horticulture listserv. We send out program announcements. And that's just to everybody that is interested in horticulture extension. So that has all the links as well for signing up. So.
Can we have a mini sale at the? At the Minor Road.
For next, let me double check. I don't see why not. If we do like a mini sale tacked onto it, I just need to double check the calendar. So. Oh.
Surely would the mini sale be like the Monday after the plant sale?
No, it'd be right after the Landscape Matters.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even.
So would the mini sale just be for us or is it?
Well, anybody.
public?
In attendance.
And, yeah.
People with money.
So you want to like bring plants or the mini sale or?
I'll send after Taylor checks everything. Yeah, if you've got something that looks good now, that's why I used to do it at Landscape Matters, is because sometimes the plant looks good in July, but doesn't look good in May or October, like ginger. And hopefully, if we can advertise it, that we'll have the plants, it'll bring in more people.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people will come because they want to buy plants that are going to attract beneficial insects or whatever. But we try to make our plants sort of fit with the topic of the community. I'll send a note out after. Okay.
Yeah, Shirley and I will talk about the logistics, and then Shirley will follow up the email. So, and also for everyone online, yeah, Shirley was discussing doing the tagging on like the mini plant sale with next month's landscape manager program, since we'll be at the Minor Road office. All right, so next thing is the Follow the Water alumni event. We are doing September 13th in Steenhatchee. So just be on the lookout for that. We'll be sending that notification out to all alumni. So, but it is going to be September 13th in Steenhatchee.
And that's just for people who did the FTW.
Yeah, for those that have completed Follow the Water, this is everyone that's already gone through that program. This is all alumni. So how many of you done, raise your hand, how many of you have done Follow the Water? So that's in here. So 3, we probably had about 7 or 8 master gardeners from Nassau County go through it total. Yeah. But yeah, that alumni event is happening on September 13th. So the alumni event is where we bring everybody that's ever participated in Follow the Water. We send them out announcements, just kind of check in, see how they're doing. We do some learning activities, etc. So anyways.
Is it open to the public now?
Yes. Yeah, we now have it open to the public. Yeah, we're able to get insurance, so, and approvals. Taylor community presentations, I can remove that. Just some of my upcoming scheduling, traveling. I'm going to be in Gainesville on July 23rd and 24th. I'm taking annual leave at the end of the month, beginning of August, July 31st to August 4th. And then I have my annual EPAF conference at the end of August. So those dates I will not be in the office. So, all right. Now with all those kind of announcements and updates from me, I know we did some of the updates for like the tours, some of the mentor and training, but are there any announcements from anybody else from any of like our committees or chairs or anything like that?
Lynn and I are getting tired of being by ourselves.
So you need more help at James Page. So we need, because we do pretty well at Minor Road getting people to attend, but James Page attendance is low. So I know it's the heat of the summer doesn't help either.
People tell me it's summer.
It's never the right time. So that'll be important. Yeah, James Page is a pretty big project for demonstration. So I encourage everyone to sign up and help out at those facilities. So it doesn't just fall on Sue and Elaine. So we do have some days where we have quite a bit of people come, but it's nice for consistency with that.
Elaine has this place, a round green Barbie store. If anybody has seen it, I think it's some of the viewers came. She thought it was at Minor Road, but I don't know if anyone would put it in the shed or brought it into the office.
I haven't seen it. I'll check the shed, but no one has access to the shed. So unless I put it in there that I don't remember. So I'll look, but.
I told her to put out something on the volunteer mail system.
Found it. Sarah.
With these demo garden work, we can do that at any time, right?
Yeah, you can do demo garden work at any time, but we do have just the scheduled dates. So that can be like the consistent date where we know people can be out there. But if your schedule is best for another time, yeah, totally appropriate. Totally appropriate. Yeah.
Taylor, is there like in those emails, sorry, I don't have my email right now. Do we have like a list of things to work on?
Wait, hold on. Like, everyone say something again, Bobby.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have my email in front of me right now. Is there like a list of things to work on? Like I can't get anywhere during the week because summer break. If I can get out on a Saturday, is there like a list of things to do if I'm on my own?
Yeah, what I would recommend is Bobby asks is like, do we have a list of things that we know that we can work on at that garden? So in case they do show up, huh?
Elaine and I put something out on the volunteer
Okay, Elaine and Sue will put something out on volunteer mail to let you know what needs to get done. So
The other half of that would be, if you do go out on a different day to do something, if you could just send out a blurb saying what you did so that we don't
Yeah.
repeat what's on the list.
if need be, what I can do is we can buy a wipe-off board for James Page that we can put in the little shed. So we can just do what? I mean, right. But that could be a good way if like something is a high need, we can write things on there. And then once it's done, someone could erase it as a completed item. But yeah, Bobby, we'll make sure that we create, Elaine, Sue, and I create some type of method that we can easily communicate that with everybody.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Yes, Robin.
I wanted to mention that we'd like to, anyone who'd like to be a mentor, if you let me and Taylor know for the upcoming class, we're not sure how many mentors we'll need, but we'd like to start creating that.
Yeah. Yeah, and today we do have a mentor meeting at 2 o'clock. So if you're interested in being a mentor, feel free to attend. Yeah. So and some of the requirements for being a mentor is we need to see like 100 hours of volunteer service, and we like seeing like a diversity of the projects that you work on, so as a mentor you can help connect those interns to different projects. So I can't remember all of our requirements, but the 100-hour one is, I know, one of them.
Right.
So
And you want to be able to be a role model. So
yeah, being a role
all
model.
the things that's expected of you, teachers, trainees.
Yeah. So all right. Good role model. All right. Any other announcements, big announcements? Sarah.
Not an announcement, but I don't think, Linda's here, but I just read the newsletter this morning. That was great, and I really like that we're putting in the help desk question.
Yeah.
You know, kind of something to give you, what have people been calling in about? What's the concern this month or this week?
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, she just sent it out this morning, the July. So thank you to that team that helps put together the newsletter. And I know they're always looking for more content. So you don't have to be a regular contributor, but if like, say you go on a trip and you want to highlight some of the cool things that you saw on that trip, some of the photos, or you found a topic interesting and you want to write like a short blurb about it, feel free to contribute something. Just because we're always looking for content that we can put into that newsletter. So yes, Paula.
And on that question, for the kids at the 4-H camp, because I'm gonna do a little blurb for that. Do we have forms or something that parents can sign that they can get their picture taken? Plus, because I also noticed the other 4-H camps were in the local West Side Journal paper.
Yeah.
And if, you know, that would be kind of cool if a photographer came out for that.
So great question. There is, can we use photographs of youth during 4-H activities? So yes and no. When they actually sign up on 4-H online, there is a consent that's part of that sign up where the parents say yes, no. So we actually already have record of who is consented, and that allows us to use it in social media, publications, etc. Otherwise, we have to blur their face or just not have them in a photograph. That's easier. Yeah, put a big bug head on them or something in Photoshop. But yeah, we already have those permissions. So, and I did send out a request. Y'all probably saw like it was last month, talking about like photography and marketing. I know Susan had mentioned that she's really interested in helping with some of the photography, but if any of you are interested in like doing photography, like historian type of perspective, that'd be fantastic. And I'm working with Miranda. Miranda's going to help. I'm meeting with her at the end of this week, really thinking about how do we do marketing, help improve our marketing and outreach. So we're going to try to create a role or project role that helps with that. So
I think that'd be kind of cute if someone would come in and and do like a shot of kids out there with the nets running around.
Yeah, so, but we'll be able to get some of those photos, so, but yeah, great, we do have consent for youth. But I just have to double check who said yes and who said no, but it's seldom that someone says no, so. Anything else? Yes, Kelly?
Well, I just had an idea. There's moving in photography for H Club.
Yeah,
If you want pictures taken during that time, maybe talk to Laura about sending out a blurb to our group.
yeah, that's actually a good idea.
I know Wolfie's part of that group, but gonna volunteer in that, but some of the other kids in the group might want to do that, so.
Yeah,
that would be a good
that'd be great. That'd be great.
opportunity for them.
I'll send that to Laura. That's a good idea. All right. Anything else for the group? Thank you all, and I'll see some of you in less than 2 hours. Thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you all later. Bye.